The development of museums. The history of museums is a fascinating journey that spans centuries, reflecting the evolving human desire to preserve and share our collective knowledge, cultural heritage, and artistic expressions. From the earliest precursors in ancient civilizations to the modern, comprehensive institutions we know today, the development of museums has been shaped by the changing priorities, technologies, and societal values of each era. As societies grew and flourished, the need to collect, catalog, and display objects of significance became increasingly important. Early museums, often established by royal families or religious institutions, were initially private collections showcased for the elite. Over time, these collections gradually opened to the public, driven by Enlightenment ideals and the growing belief that knowledge should be accessible to all. The origins of museums. The concept of museums as we know them today has its roots in the ancient world, where wealthy individuals and ruling elites would amass collections of rare and valuable objects. These early collections, often housed in palaces or temples, served as a way to showcase power, wealth, and cultural refinement. The Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all had such collections, which were viewed as symbols of prestige and status. As European exploration and colonization expanded in the 15th and 16th centuries, the flow of new and exotic artifacts from around the world fueled the growth of private collections. These cabinets of curiosities or wonder rooms were the precursors to modern museums, showcasing an eclectic mix of natural specimens, archaeological findings, and man-made objects from distant lands. Prominent examples include the Kunstkammer in Berlin and the Basilica di San Petronio in Bologna, which housed remarkable collections of rare and fascinating items. The shift towards public access and educational purposes began in the 17th century, as some of these private collections were gradually opened to scholars and the educated elite. The founding of the British Museum in 1753, one of the world's first truly public museums, marked a significant milestone in the democratization of these repositories of knowledge and culture. This trend continued through the 18th and 19th centuries, as more and more museums were established to serve the needs of an increasingly literate and curious public. The Cabinets of Curiosities. The Cabinets of Curiosities, also known as Wunderkammern, were the precursors to the modern museum. Emerging in the 16th century, these private collections were assembled by wealthy individuals and served as personal repositories for rare, exotic, and fascinating objects from the natural world and beyond. Crammed with an eclectic array of specimens, artifacts, and curiosities, these cabinets reflected the Renaissance thirst for knowledge and the desire to collect and catalog the wonders of the world. Typically housed in lavish residences, the cabinets were meticulously curated, with each item carefully displayed and categorized. Visitors to these private collections were often awed by the sheer diversity of objects on display, which ranged from stuffed animals and preserved organisms to exotic seashells, minerals, and relics. The cabinets served as both a source of intellectual fascination and a status symbol for their owners, who used their collections to demonstrate their wealth, power, and erudition. The Enlightenment and public museums. The rise of reason. The Enlightenment era, spanning the 17th and 18th centuries, was a pivotal period that transformed the nature of museums. Driven by a new emphasis on reason, empiricism, and scientific inquiry, Enlightenment thinkers sought to systematically classify and display the world's knowledge. This shift away from the earlier cabinets of curiosities towards more organized, public-facing institutions laid the groundwork for the modern museum. The democratization of knowledge. Enlightenment philosophers believed that knowledge should be accessible to the general public, not just the elite. This democratic ideal led to the establishment of the first public museums, which aimed to educate and enlighten the masses. Institutions like the British Museum, founded in 1753, and the Louvre, established in 1793, opened their doors to the public, allowing citizens to engage with art, artifacts, and scientific specimens in ways that were previously reserved for royalty and the aristocracy. Systematic classification. Enlightenment-era museums embraced a scientific approach to the collection and display of their holdings. Drawing inspiration from the work of naturalists and taxonomists, these institutions began to organize their collections according to principles of systematic classification. This allowed visitors to explore the natural world, human history, and cultural achievements in a more coherent and educational manner, fostering a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of knowledge. The 19th century museum boom. Expansion of collections. The 19th century saw an unprecedented growth in the number and size of museums around the world. Fueled by the rise of nationalism, colonial expansion, and the scientific revolution, museums began accumulating vast collections of artifacts, specimens, and artworks. Major museums like the Louvre in Paris, the British Museum in London, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York rapidly expanded their holdings, showcasing the wealth and power of their respective nations. Democratization of access. As museums grew in prominence, there was a shift towards making them more accessible to the general public. Previously, many museums had been private collections or restricted to elite circles. In the 19th century, museums increasingly opened their doors to the middle and working classes, offering educational and cultural experiences to a broader audience. This democratization of access was driven by a belief that museums could serve as engines of social progress and enlightenment. The 19th century museum boom. Architectural grandeur. The 19th century also saw the construction of massive, architecturally impressive museum buildings that were designed to awe and impress visitors. Neoclassical, Gothic, and Renaissance-inspired designs were common, with grand facades, vaulted ceilings, and monumental interiors. These architectural statements reflected the growing importance and prestige of museums in society, as well as the desire to showcase a nation's cultural and intellectual achievements. Professionalization of curation. As museums grew in size and complexity, the need for specialized knowledge and expertise in curating collections became increasingly important. The 19th century saw the rise of professional museum curators, who were responsible for acquiring, cataloging, and interpreting the vast arrays of objects and specimens that filled museum galleries. This professionalization of museum work helped to establish museums as important scientific and cultural institutions, rather than just cabinets of curiosities. The rise of national museums. The birth of national museums. As nationalism and pride in national identity grew in the 19th century, many countries established their first major national museums. These institutions were designed to showcase the cultural heritage, scientific achievements, and artistic treasures of the nation, instilling a sense of patriotism and unity among the populace. Iconic examples include the British Museum in London, the Louvre in Paris, and the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, which became symbols of national prestige and identity. Collecting national treasures. National museums amassed comprehensive collections that reflected the breadth and depth of the nation's cultural legacy. Expeditions were organized to acquire important artifacts, artwork, and specimens from around the country and the world. Curators carefully cataloged and preserved these national treasures, ensuring they would be available for study and public enjoyment for generations to come. The collections grew to encompass everything from ancient fossils and Renaissance masterpieces to indigenous handicrafts and modern industrial innovations. Educating the public. Beyond just housing collections, national museums also assumed an important educational role. They organized exhibitions, lectures, and programs aimed at enlightening the public about the nation's history, culture, and scientific advancements. By making these resources accessible to all citizens, national museums played a vital part in fostering a sense of shared identity and cultural literacy. The museums became important hubs of learning and community engagement, strengthening the bond between the people and their national heritage. The Modernist Museum. Form, clean, minimalist design. Function, prioritize visitor experience. Transparency, showcase the art, not the building. The Modernist Museum emerged in the early 20th century as a reaction against the ornate, cluttered architecture of traditional museums. Inspired by the principles of the Bauhaus movement, modernist museum design embraced a pared-down aesthetic focused on pure form and function. The emphasis was on creating a neutral backdrop that would allow the artworks to take center stage, with clean lines, abundant natural light, and an uncluttered layout. The modernist museum. This shift was part of a broader rethinking of the museum's purpose, moving away from the 19th-century model of the museum as a temple of high culture and toward a more inclusive, visitor-centric approach. Modernist museums sought to create an engaging, immersive experience that would draw in and educate a wider audience. Transparency was key, with the inner workings of the museum often on display to demystify the institution. Iconic examples of modernist museum design include the Guggenheim Museum in New York by Frank Lloyd Wright, the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth by Louis Kahn, and the Centre Pompidou in Paris by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers. These and other modernist masterpieces have had a lasting influence on museum architecture and the visitor experience. The postmodern museum. Subversion, challenging traditional museum norms. Multivocality, embracing diverse perspectives. Interactivity, engaging visitors as co-creators. The postmodern museum era, emerging in the late 20th century, marked a significant shift in the way museums approached their role and presentation. Rejecting the notion of the museum as a neutral, authoritative repository of knowledge, postmodern museums sought to subvert traditional museum norms by challenging the dominant narratives and power structures inherent in the conventional museum model. The postmodern museum. Embracing principles of multivocality, postmodern museums welcome diverse perspectives, giving voice to marginalized communities and encouraging visitors to engage with the exhibits from a wide range of viewpoints. This democratization of the museum experience empowered visitors to actively participate in the meaning-making process, rather than passively consuming the information presented. Interactivity became a hallmark of the postmodern museum, with exhibits designed to encourage visitor engagement and hands-on exploration. Abandoning the traditional look but don't touch approach, these museums invited visitors to touch, manipulate, and even co-create elements of the exhibitions, fostering a sense of ownership and investment in the museum experience. The digital museum. Online presence. The digital museum has transformed how museums engage with and reach their audiences. With robust online platforms, museums can now share their collections, exhibitions, and educational resources with a global audience, breaking down geographic barriers and making art and culture more accessible than ever before. Virtual experiences. Cutting-edge digital technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality have revolutionized the museum experience. Visitors can now immerse themselves in virtual tours of galleries, exhibitions, and even entire museums, offering a level of interactivity and personalization that was previously unimaginable. Data-driven insights. The digital museum also leverages data analytics to gain valuable insights into visitor behavior, preferences, and engagement. This data can be used to optimize the visitor experience, tailor content and programming, and make informed decisions about the museum's strategic direction. Social engagement. Social media platforms have become an integral part of the digital museum, allowing institutions to connect with their audiences in real time, share content, and foster a sense of community. This has led to increased visibility, greater audience participation, and the ability to reach new demographics that may not have traditionally visited physical museums. The future of museums. Embracing digital technology. As we move towards the future, museums will increasingly embrace digital technology to enhance the visitor experience. This could include interactive displays, augmented reality exhibits, and virtual tours that allow people to explore collections from the comfort of their homes. By leveraging the power of technology, museums can reach a wider audience, make their collections more accessible, and provide more immersive and engaging experiences. Personalized experiences. The museum experience of the future will become more personalized, with visitors able to customize their visits based on their interests and preferences. This could involve personalized audio guides, recommendations for exhibits and programs, and the ability to save and share their experiences on social media. By catering to the individual needs and interests of visitors, museums can create a more meaningful and memorable experience that keeps people coming back. Sustainability and environmental responsibility. As the world becomes more conscious of the need for sustainability and environmental responsibility, museums will play a critical role in promoting these values. This could involve using more eco-friendly materials in their exhibits, implementing sustainable practices in their operations, and educating visitors about the importance of environmental conservation. By leading the way in sustainability, museums can inspire and empower visitors to take action and make a positive impact on the world around them. Collaboration and community engagement. In the future, museums will become increasingly collaborative, working closely with other cultural institutions, community organizations, and the public to create more inclusive and relevant programming. This could involve hosting community events, partnering with local artists and creators, and inviting visitors to contribute to the museum's collections and exhibits. By fostering a sense of community and collaboration, museums can become hubs of cultural exchange and social engagement, strengthening their ties to the communities they serve.